All right, Parashat Matot Masay. We'll talk about Masay a little bit today. And you know me for quite. What's that? Ring?
It's a computer.
A what?
Computer.
Computer?
Yeah.
All right. So you know me. I like those psukim that we usually cruise by. We don't pay attention. However, they always give us a tremendous insights, and we just like slow down a little bit and see it. Sometimes the psukim actually contradict themselves, and we still don't miss it. We miss it. We don't pay attention to it. In this parasha, there's like maybe a small treasure in the second pasuk in Parashat Masay that really looks like it's contradicting itself, and it says the following. ויכתוב משה את מוצאיהם למסעיהם על פי השם, ואלה מסעיהם למוצאיהם. When was the last time you paid attention to that? He says, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote their starting point to their journeys, and then he wrote the journeys according to the starting points. Motzaim, therefore, from where they came out. So why is the pasuk changing it? Why is the pasuk changing that? So since there is such a contradiction in a way with the order of the words, I think that there is something that we could learn about it. I do have to give you like a little spoiler alert here. We spoke a little bit about that concept at the beginning of the week, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But so you'll see, maybe we'll be able to connect this. Therefore, let's try to focus out. And by the way, I did prepare a different shiur on Parashat Masay Lefi Kabbalah, but believe that we're going to do it when you're not here. Because you went fishing today instead of coming to learn with us. It really is somewhat difficult to really pay attention or to try to simplify this pasuk. However, we do know that the Torah is eternal, and it always comes to give us a message beyond the quote-unquote historical report, but also a personal message that is carried to us that is true throughout the generations. But I do believe that is really important, even nowadays, even more important nowadays. But because of that, maybe we could see this pasuk in a wider perspective and really pay attention and to see and to learn from that as well. And if we'll pay attention, we are also all in a journey. It's a journey that they all take, and I'm not talking about the journey the Bnei Israel had in the desert, but rather the journey that we go through in our lives. Each and every one of us, and we spoke about it many, many times, has its own private Mitzrayim, his own private Egypt inside of him, with whatever happened in Egypt inside of each and every one of us. That enslavement to uncontrolled desire, to immediate gratification, to external, for lack of spirituality, and maybe even wrong spirituality. The entering of the gates of impurity. We all have this Mitzrayim inside of us that, many times makes us slaves to our old habits, that we can't seem to, for whatever reason, focus our ways on more positive ways and to move on. We are all still beginner slaves to our urges and to old and bad habits, and that's our Mitzrayim. And the journey will be to the promised land, and the promised land of milk and honey will be of spirituality, of broad thinking, deep thinking, free from all these things that actually sink us down. So if you're going to take this point of view, you could really understand a little bit maybe the depth of the pshat of the pasuk. So let's start from the second paragraph. The second paragraph of the pasuk says, Masayim lemotzayim. The journey is to the starting point. So the journey is according to where you live, right? One of the greatest statements in terms of Judaism, as far as I personally feel, is, and for me it is like almost like the motto of my life, right? Of Rabbi Rabbi Akavya ben Mahalael, right? Da me'ayin bata ule'ayin ata olech ulifnei mi ata ated laten din v'cheshbon. You should know where you're coming from in order to continue the journey to where you need to be. So each and every one of us has a starting point, a source in which we come up to the world, and we bring that with us, which is our nation, our Jewish ethnicity inside of us, Sfaradi, Ashkenazi, Afghani, whatever, and so on and so forth. Our family that we bring it on. All together we call it our past. All together we call it our past. By the way, I'm going to tell you something about family. Family is important. However, sometimes family could become an obstacle, especially if it's a marriage situation. When you get married, you have to understand that you're going with the other person on the journey. If you disconnected from your family, and I'm not saying disconnect, you stop talking to them, but it's just a reference point. If you keep on living there, it will be very difficult for you to go with the other person on that journey of your joint life. One of the reasons for people to get divorced is their lack of ability to disconnect from their family and to start that mutual journey. They never go on the journey, they just spin around the train station time and time again. So have this in mind. All these are starting points on the point of journey into our lives. And before you go on the journey, you really need to be in touch with where you're coming from. Da me'ayin bata. Right? You should not lose your identity on your journey. Right? You should always remember that you're a Jew. And arguments like you are Kohen. Any Levi's here? You're a Levi. Yeah, Levi, and so, there's jobs that you need to do. So all these things are important. And don't neglect your family, your heritage, and so on and so forth. However, you need to move forward in life. You need to know your ethnicity, your shoresh, where you came from, what holds you down, what gives you nourishment, what brought you here. So you can pay your homage to those things. Appreciate those who were before you, that were able to bring you to this thing, which is very important. So there are those who are always trying to break away and to create a new identity for themselves, to break away from their root, to break away from their source. For example, unfortunately, there are many Sfaradim, and I'm not saying Ashkenazim is bad. Don't get me wrong. However, many Sfaradim, for whatever reason, disconnect from the Sephardic root and become completely Ashkenazi. But you can't go on a journey denying who you are. And you will see why. You have to make sure that you know who you are. You try to get better. Okay? And it is very important to understand that, to know your origin, where you came from. So there are people who try to break away from that, and most of the time, the effort for that to break away, the result, it's quite pathetic, and usually end up in a failure. Usually ends up in a failure. If you ask some of those who started, if you know a little bit about modern day Jewish history, you'll see that the secular Zionism that deliberately chose to disconnect themselves from their history, from who they are, which means Jews and so on and so forth. And they try to create a new identity, and that's, by the way, what's the struggle they have in Israel, right? What they call the Israeli, not the Jew, the Israeli, and that is bad. And for years, the Israeli was, and I wrote a long essay on that. I mean, I could brag. That blew really the top of the knocked off my professor. He asked me to write an essay. I had to write a certain essay, free, whatever I want, and it really blew his mind out about that. The new image of the Israeli was the Israeli with this long hair, with like, what do you call this? Wave back, strong like this, mustache, and he's like holding a gun, and drives in the Jeep and he's hugging the girls. Today, later on, it became the Israeli who is liberating the Heverman, who is liberating the Kotel and going into the world. And today is the Israeli, the high tech, and to create a false image of something new against a person that does not see himself as an integral part of what is called Am Israel. They separated the Am from the Israel. So, and they created Israeli. There's no such thing as Am Israel anymore for some of those people. There's just Israeli. So for that matter, it doesn't make a difference if you are a Jew or an Arab or a Christian. You're an Israeli. And they created their own gods of army and so on and so forth. But they disconnect themselves from the Am. And Am Israel is a nation with a tradition, with a history, with an amazing past. I mean, to think the fact that Am Israel, the Jews, are still alive today, it's amazing. Which one of the nations that lived, that were superpowers at the time, are still around? The Vikings? You see any Vikings around? Only Minnesota, the Minnesota Vikings. Do you see Romans? I don't see Romans anymore. What is there around from 2,000 years ago? Nada. No one. Spartans. I know this is madness, but there's no Sparta. You disconnected yourself from that, and it didn't work. It simply didn't work. That experiment to try to create a new identity that does not suck its nourishments or gets nourished from its past doesn't really happen. And there is an identity crisis in Israel today with the Israelis, with what's so-called the new Israelis, until the situation that we get today. I mean, with the gangsters and killings and the rape, and it went bankrupt. It simply went bankrupt. However, you should know that in, I would say, the past 35 years or so, there's a great movement back to the sources and trying to create somewhat of a revival of that, whether it's in music. They try to make, music, whether it's even the Mizrahi singers, right? What's his name? Daklon and Zohar Argov and all these guys, to Yair Dalal and Ehud Banai, trying to create a new music, a revival, as a matter of fact, of a new Israeli Jewish music that is based on the past. So many times it becomes an imitation of Arabic music or Turkish music and so on and so on, but they're trying to connect to that, whether it's food. They're trying to create food that has roots in the past, and it's really fascinating to see. Yes, of course, they have the shrimps and all that stuff like that. But I'm talking about the new Israeli cuisine and so on and so forth. And whether it's culture and so on. Why? Because they realize that in order for me to go forward in the past, in the future, I need to connect myself, not live in the past, but connect myself to the past, because that is the rootstock in which I'm building the future, or growing this tree. And we have to remember that. Of course, in the personal aspect of life also, if you want to look forward into your future, which is your destiny, first of all, you have to look back to where you are. You cannot deny who you were. In other words, if you came from Morocco, so you came from Morocco. And by the way, I can tell you this. I give certain groups of the Jewish people a tremendous yesha koach for staying who they are. For example, take the Moroccan Jews. Well, you say whatever you want to say about them. I give them a tremendous yesha koach. Why? Because they came to Israel. They were sent to the Negev, to no man's land in a desert, trying to be pushed away from society. And they did not give up on the fact that they are Moroccans, and they're proud, and they have a heritage, and they have traditions, and yet they became an integral part of Israeli society, whether the secular or the religious one, with rabbis, with professors, with musicians, with poets, and so on and so forth. Tremendous people. Never lose their identity. Yemenites are the same way. I feel very bad on people like my group of people, the Balkan Jews, the Greeks, the Turks, the people that came from the islands. They integrated and completely disappeared into Israeli society until this part of history is gone. We're talking about a tradition that is over 1,000 years old. It's simply gone into this thing, and I feel bad for it. But the only reason why they were succeeding is because they did not lose their identity from the past. So we are the same thing. And you have to look straight forward in your past. Again, not to live in the past. You have to acknowledge the past. Even if he left me scars in the past and so on and so forth, you should move on, right? You should move on, but never forget. Never forget your past, because it has tremendous treasures. And if you're going to disacknowledge that, that will be an obstacle that would prevent you from growing on. There will be something that you denied and swept under the carpet, and is really, 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 really bad. Now, so if a person feels that he cannot disconnect from his past, that's exactly comes the first part of the pasuk, and it says Motzaem lemasayem. Hamotza, destination, is according to the Masay, according to the journey. In other words, your future journey depends on where I am now and on. From this point forward. In other words, today is the starting point of tomorrow. So I need to get in touch and in tune with where I am today and where am I going to fix the today, so I will have a tomorrow. Because if you live in yesterday, there is no tomorrow, and by all means there's no today. So that's the Motzayim lemasayim. So let's say, for example, we learned the Bnei Israel were punished in the Chet of the Meraglim, that they would need to wait 40 years in the desert until the death of the whole entire generation that came out of Mitzrayim. And we know that they went to 42 different journeys. But what did they have to go to journeys? They didn't have to look for water. They didn't have to look for food. Everything that they needed to plow or to harvest, everything they needed was supplied to them. So why did they have to be wandering in the desert for 42 different times before they entered the land? I mean, all they had to do, basically, is to land in one place, to stay in one place, until the time to enter the land, until the 40 years. Comes the 40 years, all right, guys, Zangazult, let's go, let's pack, let's go, up, jump, and we'll go. Why do they have to spin around? Why couldn't you stay in the desert in one place? Again, as we know, the Torah is eternal, and it's not just sipurim on stories about what was to our forefathers in the desert. Torah comes milshon hora'ah, to teach. And that is a general path the Torah is trying to give us, how Am Yisrael acts into all the generation, and it's also as a national thing, and it comes as a private thing as well. How do I need to deal in my own personal life? What is the journeys and what the decisions that I need to make until I'm going to get the purpose to purify in our spiritual work, until I'm going to reach the place of what we call Dvekut Shlema B'Kadosh Baruch Hu, to completely attach ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. However, you should know that this movement that really needed and we must have can only come when you are connecting yourself, grafting yourself to the roots of your past in order to create a present that would provide us with a future of really establishing ourselves and really utilizing all the powers that we have today. So it's very, very important. Come into peace with yourself. If you want to succeed tomorrow, come into peace with yourself and who you are. Don't feel bad that you were born to this family or to that family. Come into peace with it. Become harmonious with it. And then you can move forward in life. So this is, I think, a tremendous, tremendous musar for us. And that's why it says, Motzayim lemasayim, v'masayim lemotzayim. Don't get stuck on the past. However, use the past to move forward in your life. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.